I figured Liana would be thrilled when I broke the news that I had the entire week off from work. Being a heavy equipment mechanic meant long hours, and I often missed out on family time. This time, however, Liana had planned a 3-day getaway with her sisters at Lake Winona. They always rented cabins, spending their time swimming, hiking, and enjoying the campfire. I had already informed her that I couldn't join due to work commitments, and she seemed understanding. But now, with unexpected time off in the middle of the week, I was excited to finally catch a break and perhaps even join them for a day or two. "Hey honey, guess what? I'll be joining you guys this time." "That's fantastic, Ben. The kids will be thrilled, and I'm sure you'll have a blast too. I was thinking of bringing the dirt bike along, if that's all right with you. There are some designated trails up there that I've been itching to try. But of course, I'll only do it if you're comfortable with it. I don't want to cause any issues." "That sounds like a great idea. There's plenty of terrain to explore at Lake Winona, and you'll definitely get some good rides in. Enjoy yourself." While Liana was busy preparing dinner, I headed out to get the dirt bike ready. It wasn't specifically an off-road bike, just a street-legal 2-stroke that could handle off-road terrain without any trouble if you didn't push it too hard. I hadn't had many opportunities to use it around home, so I was looking forward to taking it out for a spin in a new environment. Dinner was served just as I finished up my tasks. Our nightly routine included gathering around the table, a tradition Liana and I upheld without fail. Over the span of 12 years, we had built a life together, blessed with 3 children: 11-year-old Teresa, 8-year-old Jerome, and Tristan, who was 7. Our cozy frame house, albeit burdened with a hefty mortgage, symbolized our shared journey, and things seemed to be going smoothly for the Campbell family. After the meal was cleared away, the kids settled in front of the TV while I took a quick shower. Meanwhile, Liana was engrossed in something on her computer as I entered the room to retrieve my trail maps. I couldn't help but notice her swift action in closing windows and logging off, but I pretended not to notice as I busied myself in the closet. With a smile, she excused herself and left the room, prompting me to discreetly cancel the shutdown process. When I was certain she was downstairs, I seized the opportunity to investigate further. Opening her email, I found nothing in her inbox, which wasn't surprising given her meticulous habits. However, I decided to check the deleted items just in case. Liana was always cautious, particularly with her emails, and I had never questioned her about it. She had a habit of double deleting everything, leaving no trace of her digital correspondence. But this time, she had slipped up. Amidst the deleted files, I found a message that hadn't been permanently erased. "Change in plans. Ben will be joining the family retreat. You're still welcome to come, but I'll arrange for Janet to accommodate you in the last cabin. We should have some time together since he'll be occupied with his motorcycle. See you soon." The message was addressed to dturner@zebra.net. This revelation sent a chill down my spine. Who was this D. Turner, and why was he being invited to our family gathering? And what role did Liana's sister, Janet, play in orchestrating this? As Liana busied herself with laundry, preparing items for the upcoming trip, I reached for her high school yearbook from the shelf. It didn't take long to find Derek Turner's picture, accompanied by one of Liana from their prom. I was never one to overthink things, nor was I particularly suspicious by nature. Perhaps I should have been. All this time, I assumed our marriage was solid. I met Liana shortly after her high school graduation, a couple of years before my own. Despite being a few years her senior and holding down a steady job, I often found myself questioning why she chose me. If she was still involved with this guy from her high school days, why commit to me? Despite my lack of ambition, I provided for my family diligently, never really caring much for my own needs. It seemed worth it for them, until now. Despite not being naturally drawn to children, I adored my own. I'd go to great lengths for them, simply because they were mine. As a fiercely protective father, I knew this weekend was bound to be interesting. The kids wasted no time heading down to the lake, leaving me to unload everything, including the motorbike. Liana's sister Linda showed up with her 4 kids, while the youngest sister, Deborah, arrived with her 3 little ones. Unfortunately, Linda's husband Gerald couldn't make it, so it appeared I'd be the odd man out for the weekend, aside from the mysterious extra guest in the end cabin. As we settled in, I couldn't help but notice a dark green Tahoe parked nearby. After a quick lunch, I announced my intention to go for a ride. With the bike prepped and the video camera in hand, I set off. The bike's noise would surely reassure Leona that I wasn't sneaking back. After idling for a while, I shut it down and walked back to the campgrounds. The sisters were engaged in conversation around the picnic table, while the kids scattered about. Then, a tall, handsome man, presumably the owner of the Tahoe, approached the table, warmly greeted by all the women. After a brief exchange, he wandered off towards the cabins and changing rooms. Sensing something amiss, I began to follow, only to spot Leona leaving the table and heading in his direction. Derek, as I later found out his name to be, discreetly entered the ladies' area, with Leona trailing not long after. Quietly, I slipped into the adjacent space and activated the video camera, though I didn't even bother removing the lens cap, as there was nothing to see. Pressed against the dividing wall, I strained to catch their conversation. "I apologized, Derek. I had no clue Ben would be dropping by today. I'll make it up to you somehow. He'll likely be zooming around on his motorcycle most of the time, so we just need to keep an eye on the kids." "No worries, Leona. I get it. A tad disappointed, but I'm sure it'll still be fun. They're planning a little sing-along tonight near the cabins. I'll sneak down to the lake, and we can have a swim like the old days. Linda will keep Ben entertained." "I'm not sure I can wait that long." "Oh, you impatient thing. Let's see, I think I can pamper you a bit to hold you over until dark." There were sounds of clothes being removed, and then there were the sounds that finally convinced me that my wife was cheating on me at this very moment. "Okay, Derek, that's enough for you until tonight. I need to get back to my sisters." I sat there in disbelief, my heart heavy with a mix of sorrow and resignation. Catching Leona in the act was a blow, albeit not entirely unexpected, given my own underhanded tactics. I lingered in the bathhouse for another 10 minutes after their departure, grappling with the weight of what I discovered. The whole situation felt overwhelmingly bleak, and I despised the suffocating grip of depression that enveloped me. Though I failed to capture any video evidence, the camera did record 10 minutes of their conversation, providing an audio testament to the betrayal. Returning to the bike, I embarked on a lengthy, rugged ride, seeking solace in the rush of wind against my face. Confronting Leona seemed like the logical course of action, but it clashed with my non-confrontational nature. In truth, I lacked any discernible approach to conflict resolution. For 12 years, I'd harbored the illusion of a blissful marriage, only to realize I was merely a provider, a convenient presence in my wife and children's lives. Spending the afternoon exploring the beach area, I found myself drawn to its serene landscape. A grassy slope led down to the water's edge, flanked by rocky outcroppings and dense woods. A fire pit stood at the center, waiting to be ignited. While Leona, Linda, and Deborah ventured off on a hike to a nearby waterfall with the children, I took the opportunity to meticulously prepare the fire pit. Gathering wood, arranging kindling, and stacking dry logs with care, I ensured everything was primed for a roaring fire. With few others around to notice, I worked unnoticed, my thoughts consumed by the betrayal. Upon their return, I enlisted Jerome and Tristan's help in fashioning roasting sticks from the surrounding woods, a secret treat for later. Their excitement bubbled over as we kept our plans hushed, while I entrusted Teresa with bags of marshmallows, reiterating the evening's sweet indulgence. As evening descended, we all gathered around the picnic area, enjoying a satisfying supper as the children began to wind down. Linda, unusually chatty, stuck close to me, peppering me with requests for trivial assistance and exuding an extra layer of friendliness. Though I kept a watchful eye on Leona, I tried to maintain some semblance of subtlety. As the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving us bathed in a soft glow of moonlight, a debate ensued over our evening plans, with ghost stories edging out as the favored activity. Amidst the deliberation, I suddenly realized Leona had vanished, leaving Linda at my side, regaling me with elaborate details about her husband Gerald's kitchen renovation. Despite her efforts to engage me, my thoughts were elsewhere, prompting my eventual excuse to retrieve the video camera from the cabin. Linda didn't seem overly concerned, as my destination was in the opposite direction from the lake. In the darkness, the prospect of capturing any video seemed futile, so I abandoned the camera and instead grabbed 2 cans of charcoal lighter and some matches. Stealthily maneuvering behind the cabins, I descended the slope to the beach without alerting Linda to my departure. Guided by the faint moonlight, I approached quietly, noticing 2 figures in the water and a blanket strewn on the grass nearby. Leona and Derek had left their clothing and towels on the blanket. With precision, I lifted the corners of the blanket and carried it over to the fire pit. Dousing the wood with charcoal lighter, I placed the blanket on top and added more fluid. With a swift motion, I ignited the pile and leaped back just in time, though not without singing my eyebrows and arm hair as the flames erupted. The fiery spectacle served as our signal. Teresa and Jerome sprang to their feet, shouting excitedly about a marshmallow roast, prompting all the children to rush down the hill towards the bonfire. Glancing towards the water, I spotted Leona and Derek, illuminated by the fire's glow as they watched the commotion unfold. At the top of the hill, Linda looked on with a mixture of shock and dread, as if anticipating the imminent apocalypse. The children eagerly dispersed around the crackling fire, with Jerome doling out sticks and Teresa overseeing the marshmallows. Leona attempted to conceal herself along the edge of the dock as I approached with measured steps, my gaze fixed on her companion. "Hello, Derek. I'm Ben, Leona's husband. Pleasure to finally make your acquaintance," I greeted him calmly, though his response was noticeably flustered. Turning to Leona, I offered assistance. "Would you like a hand up the ladder so you can join the kids by the campfire?" "No, damn it. Just go fetch our towels from the blanket," she snapped. "Apologies, dear. I'm afraid I repurposed the blanket, towels, and clothing to ignite the fire. Impressive blaze, isn't it?" I replied with a hint of satisfaction. "No, Ben, no. Why on earth would you do that? How are we supposed to get out of the water?" Leona protested. "I'm sure Linda will be more than willing to lend a hand." "I, however, am headed home," I retorted coolly. Passing Linda on the dock as I made my exit, I ascended the hill unnoticed. Retrieving my jacket and the videotape from the cabin, I proceeded to sabotage Leona's SUV by removing all 4 valve stems with the valve stem tool from my dirt bike kit. Knowing she wouldn't be able to fix it until the following day, I then attempted to tamper with Derek's Tahoe, but the petcock proved stubborn. Resorting to brute force, I struck it thrice until it shattered. With the Chevrolet conveniently unlocked, I reached inside and retrieved Derek's registration from the glove box. While Leona could potentially use one of her sister's cars, I wagered she'd hold out for her own vehicle. I powered down my cell phone and departed the campsite astride the dirt bike, the uncomfortable journey ahead stretching out before me. Despite the discomfort, I made slow progress, stopping periodically to refuel the bike and mix the gas and oil. Thankfully, the late hour meant the roads were relatively clear as I pressed on, enduring the long miles ahead. Along the way, a green Tahoe sped past, emitting telltale white vapors from beneath. 10 miles later, I spotted Derek Turner on the side of the road, tinkering under the hood, oblivious to my passing as I continued towards the next gas station, cursing the bike's limited fuel capacity. After refueling and grabbing a cup of coffee, I perused Derek's Tahoe registration, noting his residence in Pottsville. Without delay, I charted a course, arriving in less than an hour, only to spend another hour locating his modest frame house just south of town. With Derek likely to be absent for some time, I made my entrance by breaking a kitchen window and slipping inside. In his bedroom, I found a makeshift computer setup, rummaging through the desk drawer for a nut driver to dismantle the CPU and extract the hard drive. Spotting a CD album containing a trove of discs, I seized it along with the hard drive before departing. Less than 2 hours later, including another fuel stop, I was back home, grateful for the ample space of my pickup's king cab as I stowed away my belongings. After gathering personal papers and documents, I sought refuge in a motel on the far side of town, the clock ticking past 3 a.m. With a busy day ahead, I settled in for some much-needed rest, knowing tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges. Despite my exhaustion, I found myself up bright and early. It took some time, but I managed to access Derek's hard drive. His files contained a treasure trove of emails exchanged between him and Leona, stored both in his documents folder and his inbox. While I didn't have the luxury of reading them all, I skimmed through a few to grasp the essence of their correspondence. It was evident they had been intimate, yet surprisingly, their exchanges lacked any derogatory remarks about me. On the contrary, there were compliments, with Leona praising my handyman skills, to which Derek expressed admiration. The CDs presented another enigma. There were no explicit photos, just countless snapshots of them together, engaged in various activities. One set depicted Leona with short, dark hair during her pregnancy with Teresa. The next set showcased her auburn locks during Jerome's pregnancy, and finally her long, dark hair during Tristan's pregnancy. In each picture, Derek beamed with paternal pride, a painful reminder of their shared history. With resolve, I embarked on the necessary tasks. Bank accounts and credit cards were closed, and I resigned from my job, collecting all due vacation pay and sick leave. Life insurance policies were cashed in, and cell phone services canceled. Utilities were scheduled for disconnection by week's end, ensuring no loose ends remained. At the family doctor's office, a nurse took a DNA swab with instructions to forward the results to my lawyer. Later, at the lawyer's office, I completed divorce paperwork, instructing Samuel to offer child support only if paternity was confirmed. I left a modest sum in the checking account for Leona and her children, along with signed power of attorney forms for any legal matters. The house I offered to her, with the condition that she handle the payments herself, and I even signed a power of attorney form to facilitate its sale should the need arise. The journey from Yuba City to Reading felt like a world away. Despite having enough funds to sustain myself for a while, the need to find employment gnawed at me, a means to stave off the encroaching sense of restlessness. I was acutely aware of the messes I'd left behind, including a pending breaking and entering charge in Schuylkill County. Yet I couldn't bring myself to care too much about the legal obligations I'd abandoned back home. My attempts to lay low were feeble at best. I knew eventually I'd have to update my car registration, driver's license, and insurance, risking exposure in the process. Even banking and employment posed potential pitfalls. Each morning, I observed gangs of men congregating on designated street corners, seeking day labor opportunities. Employers would select workers on the spot, paying cash for their labor, no social security numbers or paperwork required. While the physical labor provided some solace, the isolation weighed heavily on me. In an attempt to bridge the communication gap, I began picking up snippets of Spanish, finding solace in the newfound camaraderie. Eventually, I became a regular pick for the Sutter nut growers foreman, toiling away amidst walnut, almond, hazelnut, and pistachio orchards. The work was demanding yet straightforward, affording me peaceful slumber at night. After about a month, I mustered the courage to borrow a cell phone from one of the supervisors and called my lawyer. He confirmed that Leona had been served with the divorce papers. Surprisingly, she expressed no desire for anything from me, but insisted on child support. However, she had yet to provide the DNA test results requested. I remained resolute, refusing to offer support for children who weren't mine, noting that her family was assisting with expenses until she secured employment. The house was on the market, signaling the finality of our chapter together. With Derek Turner failing to file a report with the Schuylkill County Police, I realized I no longer needed to hide in the shadows. My evenings were consumed by poring over Leona's emails and scrutinizing the CD pictures. A chilling revelation emerged. 4 years prior, Leona and Linda embarked on a weekend cruise to Nassau. Leona spent the voyage with Derek Turner, while Linda was accompanied by a man named Clinton Ward, not her husband Gerald. The images painted a disheartening picture, revealing that Leona and Derek had shared a cabin. Struggling to reconcile this newfound information with my love for Leona, I grappled with feelings of stupidity and betrayal. At Sutter Nut Growers, a series of equipment failures disrupted our routine. With both tree shakers out of commission, the company arranged for a service technician from Sacramento to address the issue. Sensing an opportunity to contribute, I approached the supervisor and offered my assistance. In just an hour, I managed to rectify the problem with one shaker, much to the relief of my fellow workers. I spent the remainder of the day repairing the second shaker, finally restoring it to working order by nightfall. With everyone else gone, Supervisor Jimmy Foster kindly offered me a ride home and extended a full-time job offer as an equipment repairman, which I promptly accepted. A month later, upon returning from work, I discovered a budget rental car parked in my driveway, a clear sign that Gerald Martinez, Linda's husband, had tracked me down. He greeted me with a half-hearted smile from the front porch, and though I wasn't thrilled to see him, I endeavored to maintain a congenial demeanor. "How long have you been waiting, Gerald?" I inquired as he settled in. "About 2 hours. I could use a cold beer if you have any," he replied. I fetched us both the Fosters, and we sat down at opposite ends of the Formica kitchen table. "What would be important enough for you to fly almost 3,000 miles to see me, Gerald?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Leona asked me to come, and her parents covered the cost of the tickets," he explained. "Okay, let's get started. First of all, what are you trying to accomplish?" I prompted, curious about the purpose of his visit. "I spent the whole flight out here trying to come up with the right way to approach this. Let me tell you something not too many people know about concerning Linda and I," he began cautiously. "Does it concern Clinton Ward?" I interjected. "Yes, I guess it wasn't as big a secret as we hoped," he admitted with a wry smile. Ben, all three of the Spencer girls, Leona, Linda, and Deborah, wanted big families. It was important to them, and it was very important to their parents. We were married 2 years and had no luck. The test showed that the problem was mine. I was shooting blanks and Linda was fine. We didn't want to adopt, and we couldn't afford the artificial procedures. It took a long time, but we finally agreed that we would try and find someone else to get Linda pregnant. I realize that it sounds bizarre, but we gave it a lot of thought. Clinton was a friend from high school. Linda was dating him and sleeping with him before she met me. He was one of the helpers at our wedding. I liked Clinton, so Linda and I met with him to explain the problem. He was reluctant at first and only agreed to do it with some concessions. "Concessions?" I prompted, intrigued by the complexity of the situation. "Clinton said he would get Linda pregnant as many times as we wanted, but he wanted to be able to get together with her once a month and 1 weekend a year. On those terms, he was willing to help until he found a wife of his own. All 4 of our kids are Clintons. About 3 years ago, I was best man at his wedding, and he has not seen Linda since," Gerald revealed, shedding light on a deeply personal and unconventional arrangement. "How does that tie into Leona and me?" "It's a similar scenario with its own unique twist. I assume you're going to elaborate on that." Leona and Derek Turner had been childhood sweethearts, dreaming of a future together since their junior high days. However, their plans hit a roadblock. Derek had a water skiing accident right after high school, leaving him unable to father children. This devastated Leona, as having a family was her biggest aspiration. Despite this, Derek persuaded her to marry so she could have the family she desired, promising they'd always be close friends. "You mean bedroom buddies?" "That's a crude way to put it, Ben, but I guess the answer is yes," Gerald admitted bluntly. His words pierced through the air, each syllable echoing in my mind. Some of what Gerald said sounded like the truth, while other parts seemed like utter nonsense. Nonetheless, I decided to let him continue speaking, hoping to glean some clarity from his revelations. Leona finally agreed to it, but asked Derek to find her a husband. He didn't want anyone in the Pottsville area, so he looked up a friend he had in reading, Donnie Lopez. I believe you worked on some of Donnie's fuel oil trucks, Gerald continued, tracing the convoluted path of Leona's decisions. "Yeah, Dave seemed to be an all-right fellow," I responded, recalling my interactions with Donnie. "Well, they narrowed the search down to 3 guys, and Leona picked you. She pursued you, got you to marry her, and let you think it was your idea. You gave her a good home and a happy marriage along with 3 beautiful kids. She tried to be a loving wife to you while still maintaining a relationship with Derek. As the years went by, she grew closer to you, and was seeing less and less of Derek. She and Linda both tried to fix Derek up with other girls, but he loved Leona and wanted to keep his relationship with her. Gerald elaborated, painting a picture of intricate deceit and emotional entanglements. With a deliberate motion, Gerald retrieved an envelope from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was a DNA report bearing the letterhead Schuylkill Scientific Labs. Rather than a formal form, it was a simple letter stating that I was the biological father of our 3 children. My eyes flickered between the report and Gerald, searching for answers. "Is that it, Gerald?" I questioned, a tinge of skepticism coloring my tone. "Well, Leona broke off all contact with Derek right after you left. She made the decision that it was better for her and the children. She hoped that with Derek out of her life for good, you would reconsider the divorce and come home," Gerald concluded, leaving me to grapple with the weight of his words. I fetched 2 more beers, the silence between us thick with unspoken thoughts. As I stared at the paper Gerald had slid across the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that his elaborate tale was nothing more than a concoction of half-truths and fabrications. Leona's motives for marrying me remained as elusive as ever, and Gerald's narrative did little to clarify them. "What time is your plane back, Gerald?" I finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I have to be at the Sacramento terminal by 8. I'll have just enough time to drive down there and get the rental car checked back in," he replied, his tone resigned. "I really appreciate you coming all the way out here to explain things to me, Gerald. You probably could have done it on the phone, but I guess being face-to-face is more effective," I acknowledged, attempting to convey gratitude despite my skepticism. "Is there anything you want me to tell Leona or the kids when I get back home? I know she is hoping for some good news. She was really devastated when you left," Gerald offered, his concern palpable. "I can't think of anything right now. Give them my best, and tell them I'll be thinking about them," I replied, my words tinged with a mixture of longing and uncertainty. I accompanied Gerald to the car, sensing his disappointment at my lack of reaction. His narrative had been intriguing, especially his confession regarding his own relationship with Linda. Yet, despite the compelling nature of his story, too many inconsistencies left me skeptical. While I harbored deep affection for Leona and yearned to mend our fractured relationship, I knew that reconciliation couldn't be rushed. I craved more information, more answers that could explain and perhaps even improve our situation. As Gerald drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that his journey across the country for a brief conversation seemed excessive, leaving me with more questions than answers. The next day, I dialed my lawyer's number from California. "Samuel, this is Ben Campbell out in California," I greeted him. "I don't hear from you often enough, Ben. What do you need?" Samuel responded. "First of all, did you ever get any official results back on the DNA paternity tests?" I inquired, hoping for some clarity. "Ben, I didn't get a thing. I asked Leona 3 different times, and she promised each time, but I still have nothing." I told her I would pay for the testing, but I don't think it made a difference, Samuel explained, his frustration evident. "Leona's brother-in-law gave me a letter from the Schuylkill Scientific Labs in Pottsville that indicates that I am the father. Did you give them anything from my tests that they could use as a standard?" I asked, seeking answers. "Never heard of the lab, and I still have your results here in the office. I never gave them out to anyone. Unless they did their own DNA test on your hair or fingernails, I have no idea what they were testing against. I'll look into it. Anything else?" Samuel responded, promising to investigate. "Do you have anyone who could check out a guy named Derek Turner that lives in Pottsville? I can't help thinking that knowing something about him could be important. I realize that the divorce is almost final, and I don't want to screw things up, but if I can stop myself from making a mistake, I want to," I requested, hoping to gather more information. "That should be no problem," Samuel assured me. "Do I owe you any money?" I asked, mindful of my finances. "There is still a nice buffer in your account. I'll let you know if you get close," Samuel replied, offering reassurance. About a week later, Samuel called with updates. He informed me that Schuylkill Scientific Labs was a fraudulent DNA facility shut down by the state. Additionally, he shared details about Derek Turner, revealing that he barely made it through high school and struggled to hold a job. Despite being reported as a nice person, Derek's intelligence was lacking, and he had recently been fired from his position as a fuel truck driver, facing difficulties finding employment in the Pottsville area. When I arrived home from work that evening, Teresa, Jerome, and Tristan rushed up to greet me as I pulled into the driveway. They bombarded me with excitement as I made my way to the front porch where Leona awaited. "What's all this about?" I asked with a smile. "I thought the children should be with their father, and since he wouldn't come back to Pennsylvania, I decided to bring them here. I've already rented a place across the river in Marysville," Leona explained. "Well, why don't we order some pizza and get settled in?" I suggested, eager to make the transition smoother. For the next hour, the kids regaled me with tales of their cross-country trip, brimming with enthusiasm despite the long journey. Leona remained quiet, allowing them to chatter away. After dinner, I switched on the TV for the kids, watching as they slowly began to unwind. As Leona and I cleaned up after the impromptu meal, she spoke softly, her words laden with remorse. "Ben, I'm sorry for how everything unfolded. I had hoped Gerald could explain it to you, but it seems he didn't do a great job. The day after you found Derek and me together, I ended things with him. It was foolish of me to continue the relationship for as long as I did. I've known for years that our marriage meant more to me than my friendship with Derek. We were so intertwined for so long that it was difficult to sever those ties. I know it sounds nonsensical, but I don't know how else to explain it. I haven't seen Derek since that day at camp, and I have no intention of seeing him again. I hope you can understand that it's you whom I love and want to spend the rest of my life with. You're the father of my children, and I want you to help raise them." I don't know what to say, Leona. You've caught me by surprise. There are a lot of things I don't understand, and maybe I don't want to understand them right now. It's nice to see the kids again, and I hope I can help you with them. Right now, I don't feel comfortable enough to jump back into a relationship, but I'm open to working on it, I replied honestly. "That's okay. I understand your reluctance. I have a restaurant job lined up that starts next week in Marysville. I'll be working evenings and weekends. I would appreciate it if you could watch the kids while I'm working until I can get something set up," Leona explained. "That sounds good to me. Are you going to drop them off, or do you want me to pick them up?" I asked. "I'll drop them off here and pick them up after I'm done. I just hope it won't be too much of an imposition," she replied. The arrangement seemed to work out fine. On the first day, I discreetly took DNA mouth swabs from each of the children and immediately mailed them to Samuel. Teresa was opening up a little bit more than normal and seemed to be concerned about the relationship between Leona and me. I didn't want to get the kids involved in this mess, so I tried not to mention anything about the divorce. A letter arrived from Gerald, accompanied by a newspaper clipping and a brief note that simply said, "FYI." The clipping featured a picture of Derek donning a soldier uniform, signaling the completion of his basic training and his imminent deployment to Bosnia for a 2-year assignment. Curious, I called Teresa over to inquire. "Do you know this man?" I asked, pointing to the picture. "Sure, that's Uncle Derek, but we're not supposed to talk to you about him," Teresa replied cautiously. "Do you see Uncle Derek a lot?" "We used to, but we couldn't tell you about it, or Mom would get mad," she explained. "Did you see him after I left?" "Yes." "Where?" "Mostly at Chuck E. Cheese or places like that. Mom and him would talk while we played games and stuff," Teresa recalled. "Did he ever stay at the house?" "Only once. It was a week before we left, the day before he went to join the army." "Tell me about it." "Okay, but I'm not supposed to. He came in a cab and told Mom he had enlisted. She cried a lot and hugged him. We watched TV while they talked. Mom was still crying when we went to bed, and he wasn't there in the middle of the night. The next morning, he left in a cab. Mom was still crying. That afternoon, she said we were going to California to see you. Please don't tell Mom I told you this, or she'll get mad at me," Teresa pleaded. "Did your mother cry when I left?" "No." Things were starting to make sense, but not in the way Gerald had likely hoped for. That newspaper clipping didn't bring the clarity or resolution I'd expected. I had hoped for a chance to reconcile with Leona, but now I wasn't so sure. Confronting her with the information I had was tempting, but I couldn't muster the courage. I couldn't bear the thought of arguing about fidelity with someone I loved. Teresa's honesty contradicted what Gerald and Leona had told me, and it was clear who was lying. I chose the coward's way out. Sitting in the Seattle airport, my phone rang. It was Teresa. "Dad, where are you?" "I'm in the Seattle airport, sweetheart." "When are you coming home?" "Not for about 10 months. I signed a contract for this job." "Mom's really mad at me for telling you about Uncle Derek. We're leaving for Reading as soon as she gets her final paycheck. I think she's mad at you too." "Teresa, I'm sorry if I got you in trouble. You did nothing wrong. Remember that." "I'm going to miss you. So will Jerome and Tristan. I'm sorry you had to leave, but I understand." "I love you, honey. Tell Jerome and Tristan I love them too." After Teresa hung up, I called Sangal. The DNA results were in. None of the kids were mine. Another lie from Gerald and Leona. The divorce would be final in 2 weeks. I promised Samuel I'd send support money as long as there were no further issues. Provo Bay might be freezing, but at least the wound in my back was healing. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.